Hello, 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 and welcome to Property Game Changers live on the Property Game Changers Facebook page. We are here celebrating the power of ethical property investment. We're celebrating with people who really changed the game in property. We're celebrating the power of ethical property investment to really change lives. We're debunking the myth that you need a lot of money to get started in property. And we're inspiring each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. And our property game changer today is the inspirational Dolapo Oni, property developer and host of the super popular Property Mum podcast. And Dolapo has built up an 8-figure property portfolio with her husband since quitting her city job 8 years ago. $1 million per year, not bad.
No, that was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Alongside family life with her children, she's flipped properties, done developments, and built up a 6-figure rent-to-rent SA portfolio. So what I really love about that is the diversity of wealth creation and cash flow businesses. And she specializes in buying at auctions. Just pre-live, we were talking about what's happening in auctions now. So it'd be really interesting to hear from that perspective. And as a regular auction buyer, she has been featured in that epic classic Homes Under the Hammer. And we look forward to hearing more about your flamboyant purchase, which I have seen online, where you've got your gorgeous church, which you're converting. And her big goal now is to give back and to build an orphanage back home. And we'll be finding out more about where back home is, to develop musical gifts and talents in children. Welcome to Property Game Changers, Dolapo Oni.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was an awesome intro. And I'm going to try not to put on the interviewer hat because most of the time I'm the one doing the interviewing. So I'm going to try not to ask you questions. But yeah, it's really good to be on your show. And, you know, you're doing amazing things. So really, really good.
Yeah, thanks. Dolapo, just to give people a flavor of who you are. Obviously, everybody knows you now as the Property Mom, but who were you, you know, just over 10 years ago before you got started in property?
So my story is a typical story where, you know, go to school, go to university, and then I went to the US for my master's. I got an MBA from George Washington University. And, you know, started working in the US, worked with KPMG, which is one of the top 5. So it was a great experience, right? You're young, you're working in the city as well, because I worked in DC. And, you know, really good experience. And then at some point, life happened. I found myself in the UK and basically started again in the UK and then got into working in the city again, this time with BP Oil and Gas. So I was working in Liverpool Street first, and then eventually we moved to Canary Wharf. And so my life really was about, you know, just going to work, living life like a city chick, as you say, and just, you know, it was okay, you know, good job, progression, everything kind of working out. But, you know, my dad is an entrepreneur. So, you know, you always have to know about people's context. My dad is an entrepreneur. He's always been. So he always pushed us to be thinking about what is that special talent you have? You know, and I know within oil and gas, I was always constantly looking around to see, okay, what can I do here that, you know, makes me different? Just never really found it. And then, of course, you know how UK is. When I relocated here, I found there's quite a lot. Like my auntie was buying property, somebody else was buying property. It's like different people were into property. I just thought, okay, this would be an interesting thing to look into.
Yeah.
So one of the earlier times, I just went to an auction, you know, kind of the easiest way to find out what's going on in the property market. You know, I just went to an auction and it was just the buzz. I was just like, wow, this is interesting. But what I noted at that point, that was like about 2005, was that prices just seemed, you know, like now where a lot of people are buying, there just seemed to be so many people in the market. So just because I had that MBA and I had an understanding of how financial market work, how things work generally, macroeconomically, I thought actually doesn't seem like it's a good time. And that was a very good call because I would have been buying at the height of the market if I had purchased then. So that's pretty much, you know, coming into property. Of course, I've gone straight into how I've gone into property, but really, I was working in the city. I knew I wanted more. My job was okay, but I definitely wanted to find what my passion was and work in that space. And as it turned out, property was that. So.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it seems like you had that sense when you were going to those auctions, even, as a beginner at that stage in 2005, there's lots of people buying here, things are going crazy. And that's when the frenzy was really in full flow. Basically, everyone thought you could not lose money in property because the prices were just going up. It was a flipper's paradise. And but you just held back, and it's similar to what's happening now, isn't it, really? The prices are going
Yeah, so indeed. And I'm always very skeptical about the market because it never, at the point where you're buying, it just never seems like it could ever go downwards. It always seems like it's going to have an upward trajectory. And because I've dabbled a bit in stocks and shares as well, I understand how that works. It seems like anytime you buy, the property immediately crashes, and then you sell, the property prices fly off the shelf. So it's like, just being aware of where you are and where the market is, so I've always been very, very conscious. So even now, I said that in the latest podcast that I released, where I was like, what the heck is up with property prices? Where I'm talking about how we should really just step back and make sure that the deals themselves work, because then you can ride the tough times. The only people that survived the tough times back in 2008 recession are the people that had good cash flow in properties. Right? So they were able to weather that storm and come out on top. But the fundamentals work. That is, you have good cash flow. There's a good disparity between your mortgage, what you're paying as a mortgage, and what you're receiving as rent. As long as you have that, you can, for the most part, get through the difficult times if they do come. So, we're just watching the space to see what happens.
No. So you held off a little bit in 2005 when you first started going to the auctions. Tell us a little bit about how did you actually get started?
Okay. So I've been going to auctions. I wouldn't necessarily say I had the money, but I was just interested, right? And actually, the reason why I could have bought then was because, remember, there was a lot of 0% mortgages.
Yes.
So you didn't really have to, you just had to have enough to pay your lawyers. And I remember one deal that somebody brought that just seemed so amazing until I looked at it. I know how much I was earning on a monthly basis, right? And the rental was so high. The mortgage was so high. The rental was like about 100 or 200 pounds higher than the mortgage. So I remember even then not knowing anything about property investing as I know now, knowing that, look, this is a big risk. I understand I'll own this asset. It was going to be a house in Ealing. But if anything happened, I would instantly be, I would have to come up with over £2,000 in rent, in mortgage to cover, if say for instance a tenant's left. So just understanding the fundamentals, I knew, not to do it then. So when the market crashed, it then became obvious that, okay, now this is the time. If you don't do it now, it's never going to happen. And as it turned out, and I always say, always keep yourself around people who are in property, even if they're not gurus or they're not like mentors or whatever, just be with people who are interested. Because what had happened was another friend of mine who was in the city, who's also now a property mom, I say, she we had met and we had been talking a lot about buying and getting on the ladder. So immediately prices, and the thing is, it's easy to say in retrospect that, property prices were, then we were scared. We were scared buying. We knew that we were buying, but it wasn't like it looked like it was going to work out. It looked like prices were still going to be going further south, just because of all the doom and gloom in the market. At that point, Lehman's had just collapsed. Many things were going on. So us deciding to buy at that time, it sounds like a no-brainer now, but it wasn't. But the thing was, she was transitioning from being a tenant. She wanted to get her own place. So it just was a perfect pair. I knew she had a good job. So she was going to be my first tenant and I was going to be a co-owner. So we were co-owning the property and she was going to be the tenant in that property. So it was a relatively safe bet. So that's how we purchased our first property together. But once I understood how property worked from then, it was a bar that was it. I knew this was my calling in life.
Yeah.
And then pretty much I started getting into it, buying, 1 or 2 properties, flipping. And that's what I really started off with. And I think on my second or third deal, I just said, why am I going to work? I didn't understand. All I think about is property. When I'm at work, I'm going to about it. So, I'm not doing them any favors, by steaming out during my lunch hours to rush to view properties and then coming back, I just like, you know what, let's just throw it in. This is working. I'm fine. Yeah, so.
I can so relate to that. When I first got interested in property, I would think about property all day at work, and nothing's really changed since then. But tell us about one of your first flips, because this is a strategy I think appeals to a lot of people, because with a flip, you can borrow the money or use your own money, but you're going to get it. Well, the hope is that you get it back. So tell us about one of your first flips.
So one of my first flips was in, I'm trying to think which one is the better one. So there was one that was in Southeast. So around, it's a road called Sumner Road, just off of a sort of Peckham area. And it was a nice, cute one bed. And, I think about what I know now versus what I knew then. And it was a great deal. I did well. But, one of the fundamental flaws that I did with that deal was I just bought it as a one bed, did it up and put it back on the market as a one bed. Like literally. And I still managed to make money. I don't know how, but and that's all I was trying to do, because I was just really trying to match, or just slightly, try and match close to my salary. So I think from that was about my second or third deal. And I just thought, you know what, this is so easy. It's almost like you just buy the property, get a guy to refurbish it and then put it back on the market. But I learned two things from that deal. The first one was that a lot of times you plan something, it never goes according to plan. So I got an offer within 2 weeks of that property hitting the market, right? And it just seemed, and my understanding at the time was that within a month or so, I would have completed and then the cash would be back in my account. So I can go in. So if you look at my plan, my master plan, which has gone completely bonkers now, I had this by month 1, and then by month 3, I'll be in the next project, because I would have gone to an auction, bought another one because I already sold the month before. Like I had these really aggressive timelines. So I got the offer, everything's going according to my timelines. And then they ended up having issues with mortgages, because of course that was the period where companies will withdraw mortgages and all of that. So they had to get a new mortgage, and it just went on. And then 5 months later, so because I got the offer within 2 weeks, I didn't bother getting a tenant. I just left it empty the entire time, because we're always going to be, it was always like, oh no, next month. And the end of paying mortgages. But guess what came out of that second thing? I realized that I couldn't put long-term tenants in the property. So remember, we're talking 2000, and by this time I'm not quit my job yet. This is about 2009. At 2009, I then realized I needed some way to fill in the gaps when I was trying to sell the properties. I couldn't put long-term tenants in the properties. So I started looking online for short-term tenants. And guess what I discovered? Service accommodation. So service accommodation for somebody who's in development, refurbs, is like the perfect marriage. You have the property empty, you style it up because, you want it to sell. But while it's being styled out, you still have tenants who are paying you, or guests who are paying you. And at the time, I was only trying to pay off my mortgage. I wasn't trying to pay anything else. But then when I posted those properties online, I realized how popular they were, of course, because I was just putting them at mortgage plus, right? Understanding that I have earned a lot more even in that time from the weekly and nightly bookings. So anyway, it worked out very well in that I learned that my further deals after that to make sure that I put the properties on the market at the same time for service accommodation as I did for sale. So it gave me access to property. It meant that I could do valuations, I could do viewings, I could book when the property would be empty, when just had more access. And then when I'm able to sell the property, then I'm not under pressure because I have income coming in. Right? So so it worked out very well.
That is so brilliant. And tell us a little bit about, how did you first manage that? Because at the beginning, you've got one unit, so that's fine, because, even if you DIY. But then you've gone from there to build up this 6-figure SA service accommodation business on the side of your development business. And so tell us, how did you go from one to many without losing your marbles?
We're talking about many. And this is why I love service accommodation. Actually, I think it was in the middle of the 2015. I wanted to launch. At the time, I just didn't know anything about courses or anything like that. But I wanted to learn because at that point, I only had 5 properties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of where I was operating with rent to rent, because of course, once I discovered that there was a way to earn income, I understood the differences between the prices that I was charging as for normal rental and the amounts I was able to achieve as a short-term rental, right? So I remember the first ever property that I took on as a rent to rent. It was a property where it was stunning 3-bed, 3-bath, literally outside the station in zone 2.
Wow.
And the guy who was renting out this property just wanted like 2,500 for the property. And because I knew the disparity at this point, I only had 2 beds, 1 bed, but I knew how much they were already achieving. So I was like a 3-bed, 3-bath in zone borderline zone 1, zone 2. I know this is easily 200 to 250 per night. So I said, you know what, don't worry about it. I'm going to find a long-term tenant for this property. Just give it to me. And I pretty much just signed up as a long-term tenant for the property. And because it was a management company, they pretty much didn't care as long as you took care of the property. And really, that was my first property as a rent-to-rent. I didn't even know what rent-to-rent was. It was it just made financial sense. And we're talking about 2000. I've had that property now for 8 years. So we're talking
8 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
Years. It's such a strong cash flowing property, as you can imagine. So it just turned out that I just kind of stumbled on it and was like, the disparity between the rental, the long-term rental, and so this long story is to say that really the reason why you can build up a 6-figure business quickly using those strategies is because you don't need, at any point in time, I've never had more than 7 properties, but you have to pick the right properties. Because, and 7 properties is very easy no, I won't say easy. Service accommodation is never easy. But 7 properties, you're easily just over 6 figures, right? Easily. And that's not even, we're not talking growth. We're talking by the time you paid all your bills and everything, because of the type of disparities that you can get in the prices that you're paying versus how much you're earning. And that is all until the lockdown happened, of course. Lockdown has been carnage. So you can imagine how I've been struggling over the past few months. First of all, my first strategy, auction, which is my main source of purchasing, auctions have just kind of collapsed on themselves in a sense. As in the auctioneers are excited. They're doing their breaking figures, like breaking records, 90% sold, things that never happened before. But this is auctions where typically, if you do your math right, you can get really good deals within them. All of a sudden, that path of purchasing property gone, at least for now, because there's so much demand in auctions now. And then my secondary strategy, service accommodation, also taking a massive hit. Do you understand? So it's like the lockdown. This is where as somebody was saying that you can't be in business and not expect that there will be down times. So I've ridden great times in UK property market, I must say. I didn't know at the time when I was, literally quitting, and my boss was saying, I don't think this is a good idea. I think you should take time, take a sabbatical. And I was like, no, I know this is my calling. I'm going, right? And then riding the market all the way till 2020, and then all of this pretty much crashes. And this is where you know that you're made of steel if you can survive.
Yes.
Because everything literally crashed with the lockdown.
Well, you have there's so much gold in what you've been saying there, Dolapo, and I am just like, oh my gosh, I need to know more. There's so many times I wanted to jump in and say, because I'm just a nosy person and I don't actually do service accommodation. And I was so interested to hear you say, there's a few things I was interested to hear you say. I know that people are very nervous of high rents. So to take on the commitment to pay £2,500 every month, and do that. So I would love to know if you can give us a ballpark. What is the cash flow or profit or difference between the costs of running that unit and what you typically make pre-lockdown, obviously?
Pre-lockdown, yes, because lockdown, that's a different story. But pre-lockdown, that's one of my best examples to give, because at 2,500, you think it's a lot, except that I didn't know at the time that the 3-bed, 3-bath in the borderline of zone 1 and zone 2, minimum you're getting in the summer is $350 per night. Do you understand?
Wow.
Yes. So even in the worst season, which is usually January, February, you're still getting 200 per night, And then even at 50% occupancy, I always say that January, February is when you want to be just covering your costs. You're not trying to make any money. If you do make money, sometimes you get corporate bookings, and that just ties you through that period. But if you can get into Easter, which is usually March, April, then pretty much it's just smooth sailing all the way down, which is ironic because that's when the lockdown occurred. So pretty much you're running sort of on, you're running on last year's profits, slightly for 2 months of the year, and then you kick off pretty much from March, April, and steady. So it just rises up, and June, July is where it's almost like you can get enough properties, and you definitely can't get enough 3 beds. So, so 3 beds in June, July, you're taking 6 weeks, 8 weeks of solid 350 per night. So do the math. Even if you're paying £1,000 in bills, which you are not, it's still very good. So you only need about 3 solid 3 beds, and that is, and then of course you have the mix of 2 beds, 1 beds, just to bring cash flow in. So that was my strategy. And it wasn't one that I needed too many of. I just had those properties sort of keeping cash flow. Because I don't know if you've interviewed any developers or anyone who's in refurbs. When you're in a project, completely skint.
Yes.
All of the money just goes. Somehow we're always over leveraging in terms of everything. So somehow the bill always goes. You'll make your money in the end, but during those periods. So service accommodation for me was a great way to tie with my development business because there's always cash flow. So and it's true what people say. Some people think that, oh no, it's not true, but you can't. The amount you generate from service accommodation does go into supporting your development business because you're generating so much cash at the end of the year that can then work out as at least contributing to the deposit, so that you can upscale the type of property you buy. So, for me, it's like the perfect combination for
it is. And what I love about your model is that it's a small number of quality properties, because I've spoken to people. Ben Brand I had on recently doing amazing things, gone from 0 to 45, and he's aggressive growth plans, 45 units. But to me, that's the kind of business that it's a huge operation, really, to support that. And it's in lots of different areas as well. So for many of us who have coming into property partly for a lifestyle, a legacy, for other things that we want to do and other areas that we want to grow in, that's maybe not the sort of business that we would be looking to run. Although hats off to the guys who are doing it. That is exactly the right thing for him. But I love what you're doing here. You've got 7 incredible properties. I've done the maths. I had to get my calculator here. And it's way it's a lot of cash flow.
Ridiculous. Yes. So
go on. What I was going to say is people always look at what are the bad things that could happen if I go into this. So you've been doing this for 8 years now and achieving these incredible amounts, and then we've now had a period of 6 months where it hasn't been incredible. So it's balancing between that and 7.5 years when it was. So that's the way I kind of look at it. And so tell us about what you're doing with your service accommodation now. How are things going? Is it picking back up and so on?
Yeah. So and this is the thing with life, right? Is because of that, what happened, it made me go back and really sit down and review. So first of all, once I heard the announcement, I think it was Donald Trump's announcement that no more flying into the US or something ridiculous like that. And I was like, oh, if that's going to happen in the UK, then that is the business gone. So instantly carnage. So good thing is because I've had this service for a long time, I built up a lot of goodwill with my landlords and agents. And there were not that many for one. So, and then speaking to them to then delist them. Remember, I'm now not on any long-term guaranteed rent where I'm tied in. So I already knew this is not something that I can stay in. As I'm just going to be hemorrhaging cash. And right now, I'm trying to preserve cash. So I immediately sent a message to them and said, you know what, take my deposit, use it as your 2 months, because most of them were taking 6 weeks, 2 months deposits because of the type of business I was running. So you know what, just use that as the deposit, my notice for the next 2 months. And I'm going to minimize my losses here. So that's pretty much how I did that. But then, so I knew we're going to ride over, I didn't know the lockdown. Obviously, we didn't know the lockdown was going to be this long. And now that we're even there's another one coming, it became sensible to then re-strategize. But the thing about being a business person, and honestly, I can say that confidently now, is that your brain is switched on, in that you just spot opportunities. So, I was very excited, actually, Stephanie. First time I heard about you was, I think you made a comment about somebody called Daniel Priestley.
Yes.
Yeah. So Daniel Priestley is who kind of got me set up where I am now, that I even have the Property Mom and all of this. Because, you can have mentors from afar. He had written a book called 24 Assets. I know, because I'm already in assets building, right? I'm back building property and all that. But this book was so revolutionary for me, because it said, if you're not building online assets and digital assets, then in the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to be extinct. Now, I'm a business person. I'm property. Why, at that point, I was like, I need to understand what he's talking about. So I happened to go for an event, and one guy that was talking about, digital marketing and all of that, and building assets online. And that's what I started doing from the middle of last year, right? So middle of last year, we have no idea this is coming, right? Finally, all I'm doing is I'm writing courses, writing, commenting, like putting a lot of content together. And even at some point, my dad is around, and he's like, it's funny, you've almost abandoned your service accommodation business completely. You're focusing completely on just, writing content, trying to build up different platforms online. And then this happened. So, of course, I'm like, you know what, goodbye. And then just focus. All I've been doing over the past 6 months has been just building up on the assets. The Property Mom podcast, all of those things, that all happened before the lockdown. I was already before the lockdown happened. So once the lockdown happened, so I come from a very Christian background, right? And we don't necessarily believe that, like different people have different philosophies about how wealth is created. I strongly believe that nobody's going to just come and give you, like funds and just hand you money. But ideas is where it comes from. You get these ideas that you run with and you execute. Don't just have them, have lots of great ideas, but you execute them. And that's where the reward really is. So that's kind of how, I survived through. It's like all of these things were being put in place, so that by the time we came into the lockdown, I was like, yeah, okay, all this stuff is going on. But then I had this renewed energy, because I had been building all this, and I understood why I had been building all this up till now. And so that's pretty much what has been happening. Now, to bring you back, so because I've been building all of this, the mentorship, talking to different people, one of the students that I had brought me to this amazing property in Greenwich. And so we've just gotten back into getting another service accommodation unit in Greenwich. Now, Greenwich is okay because it's not in the city. It's kind of outskirtsy, there's greens, there's all this, so it will work in terms of service accommodation. And literally picked up the keys, we already have people lined up. So, I think business is amazing. I love being in business, I have to say, because it just brings out all the creativity within you. It's, you just really can, you just have to spot the opportunities. But I always say that you'll never know this about yourself until you actually launch out. So when I started, 10 years ago, I didn't know this was the journey I was going to have, right? I just thought I was going to buy property, refurbish it, and sell it. And so that's why I love property, is because guess what? From that, I discovered service accommodation. I discovered now, and within the property space, I'm in mentorship. I have courses. I'm running a challenge coming up soon with somebody else I met. There's so many avenues and opportunities, and that it gives you. And one of the blogs I wrote recently, I wrote why moms should consider investing in property. I don't care if you're busy, you're part-time, you're working, just have something on the side you're building, because even if it's just that you have assets at the end that you can hand over to your family, you've done well. But if you then discover this dream life, right, where you're completely, pouring out yourself into what it is that you enjoy doing. I love interior decor. And that's why I like service accommodation, because you have to decorate the places. So you just find everything that you want to. You just find yourself in it. And that's when you're in the business that you are supposed to be in. So definitely, everyone that knows me knows that property is my passion. So.
And gosh, again, you've said so many things there that sparked off so many things. But let's some of the big ones. Let me call out to excuse me. Pastor Graham Lindsay is saying blessings. Carol was commenting when you were talking about your service accommodation. That sounds amazing, Dolapo. And she's also asking, how do you choose the right area in London? Which we'll come back to that one.
I love that question. Yeah.
But Daniel Priestley, so right area. So that was very similar to me. I read a different book, but the message is the same, that every single business needs to have digital assets. I now take it further and say every single person needs to have digital assets. Every single person with any spark of an idea that needs to be shared needs to have digital assets. And so I just think that is a total game changer in life, in business, in impact, in success, and it's something that has only been available to us, in the last few years. You couldn't have done this what we're doing now a little while ago. And it's so special for people to be able to look and see Dolapo is just like me. She's doing it the way I want to do it. She's doing it in a different model, a small number, bigger properties, perhaps. I mean, I'm sure you have a different. But tell us about Carol was asking about how you do choose the right area for service accommodation in London. We also heard that during lockdown you gave some properties back, but at the same time you're taking other properties on. So tell us how you're able to do that.
Okay. So to answer Carol's question first, so one of the main things I say with when you're selecting a property, remember, we're not talking volumes. You don't have to have, you can, and that's a very good point you made, which is that, you can go big. If you want to have the 40, 50 properties, please be my guest. But you have to look at your lifestyle. I have 2 young kids, both of them are under 5. I don't care how well organized you are. There's no way you're not still involved with, that number of properties. All you need is a few things to go wrong, and then you're back involved. So I had to keep things nimble, but still profit making. So one of the things I say about selecting a property, you want to maximize the number of guests that are interested in that property. So you will need to select properties that are in an area that will attract tourists, but will also attract medical, will attract students, will attract financial services. Do you understand? So you want to tick as many of those boxes. It's not always possible that you can tick all of them, but you want to tick as many as you can. So that's why I like the 2 and the 3 beds, because you're definitely targeting not just families. You will also get corporates, you get contractors, So in terms of area, there are areas in London that work. There's some areas that work really well because those areas, the council isn't so fussed about the 90-day rules. So you can work, within those spaces. And then there's some areas where they're just so central, and they're not in central London. It's very easy access. So you want to be looking for areas that have very easy access to central, but don't necessarily have to be central, right? But they're close enough to maybe a hospital or close to a lot of international schools. Those types of properties attract a lot of international travelers who have different reasons. And then if you're also in a residential area, you also then attract all the people that want to do refurbs on their properties that need somewhere local to stay. Yeah. So, you just need to be in that kind of location that has all these multiple uses that you can easily adapt. And that's how I choose my properties.
That's brilliant. And we've had a few more comments. Rachel said, "That's Dolapo, that's golden. Business is indeed a solid place for creativity." And I know that hearing all this, you may be interested. So in the challenge that you mentioned. So can you tell us a little bit about the challenge, what people will get out of the challenge, who should be involved?
Yeah, so we came up with the name Boss Mom Property, which is different from Property Mom Podcast, which is what, that's what I'm doing most of the time. But Boss Mom Property is really about, and that's the name, is all in the name, isn't it? You're looking for people who are interested in property, maybe don't know how to go about it, or already at the beginning stages of their property journey. And one of the core things we want to achieve from the challenge is to make sure that you understand the strategies that work for you. Because like we said earlier, that not all strategies work for everyone. You have to really look at your lifestyle and then work out what strategy you pair together because you usually have about 2 strategies or 2 niches that you'll be working with that tap into your strengths. So you want those strategies, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through like a deep dive session where we're going to be doing that. Now, I'm doing this with somebody called Danielle Bell, and Danielle is inspirational. She's amazing, and she's a property sourcer. That's her strong skill. But in addition to property sourcing, she's also like the crack the whip type of person. So I'm of the kind of, let's try and make things work, collaborative. She's the, you got to get it going. You're like, yeah. So so it works very well together. She's back. So, so together, the idea is to create like a network of women that are really just about trying to build their portfolio. And I think 2 most important assets we have, the kids and the property. So of course, we're not neglecting our husbands. We love our husbands, like, we take care of our husbands and all of that. But, those 2, and the reason why the name Property Mom came is because those are the 2 assets I want to use. I'll use that term, that really pull at me, like constantly, especially when they were younger, constantly needing my attention, like constantly, and I'm torn between the 2, like, what do I do now? Baby's crying and I have a client meeting, how are you doing that? So the name was an easy choice, right? So the idea from the challenge is we have a 3-day challenge. We'll have in the evenings, we'll meet up to just sort of go through content, and then we give you activities that you need to do to get you started on your journey or to scale you up on your journey.
Brilliant. That's phenomenal. And people can get in touch if you're listening to this and you want to find out more. It's bossmumproperty.co.uk, and you can be part of the challenge and really get crystal clear on where you want to go with your property journey. So now we've talked quite a bit because I got intrigued there with your service accommodation, but also you're big into development. So tell us about how you got started in development, some of the things maybe that you have learned along the way.
So development is a natural progression from refurbs, right? So you're doing the 1 beds, like I told you, we're doing the one beds, and then we evolved into doing the loft, the extensions. And so my last project was where we were converting just a simple 1 bed, but we were extending the entire back end so that we could create 2 additional rooms, a living room, and then we had the kitchen. So then we transform it from generating it was about 1,200 in rent to 2,100 in rent.
Wow.
So those types of things. And then because we purchased it at the lower end, really, you have it revalued, and then you pretty much can get all of your money out. And that's how, so bless you. And that's how I've kind of evolved into the BRR method. That's the buy, refurbish, refinance method. So now I'm very, again, as you can tell, I'm very deliberate in my approach to property. I don't want to just be doing work for the sake of. I'm trying to maximize as much as I can with the little that I have. So what I'm trying to do is I won't pick a property unless it meets like my 5 golden rules. So I need to know that I'm getting a slightly discounted price. I can live without that as long as I know that I can up the value. So that's where development comes in, where you're either converting it, adding an extension or a loft or whatever. And then once you're doing that, you've added enough value so that when the valuers come 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, they can revalue such like all of your initial capital. So that's the golden apple, is that you can take out all of your initial capital out of that deal and then roll into the next project. And that I found out just by chance, going on one of these property auctions, viewings. And people are always like hushing what plans they have for the properties in the auctions when you go for the viewings. And I happen to overhear some people talking about their plans. And I realized that's how I discovered BRR. I was like, oh, you can do that. Like, you can just refurbish the entire property and add value to it. And then you don't have to sell the property. Because remember, I got into flipping. I thought flipping is how to build my wealth. But I very quickly realized that flipping is a difficult way to build wealth with flipping, because you're constantly in the project or out of the project or in the project. Or you can have multiple, I guess, with other people's funds. But you really want to build portfolio and to build assets. You want to be refinancing and moving on, and you can do it at a sort of in a simple way where you're not over leveraging yourself, right? You have a balanced portfolio. So that's pretty much what has happened in my development career, is that it's gone from strength to strength and just kind of build. And I guess now I'm looking for the commercial. That is my next big thing, is the commercial lot. Now, talking about the church. So the church, I've done a few things in auctions that are just completely, where I've seen a property and I thought, I need to have that property. I will just bid for it, you know. Now, the church was one of those. I bought it. It just happened to sell for a really low price. I couldn't believe it. And I just bought it. Now, one of the things I talk about with flipping is how you have something called seller's remorse. I've always struggled from that. So BRR actually saved me from having to deal with selling all the time, because every time I sell, I always feel like I've just lost the cash flow machine, right? I know I've made money, but my whole thing is about cash flow, ongoing cash flow. So I knew I needed to get out of flipping very quickly. So when I got the church, the idea was the 9, 10 flats and whatever, until I got there and discovered that the area wasn't going to work for that model. So I held on to the church up until this year. And then as it turns out, the council in the area is doing this complete revamp of the entire area. And they called me up and they were like, we want to buy the property. And I said, I love this property. I can't sell it. And they're like, you have to sell it. We need the property. So in the end, we went to a through and then came up with the price that worked. But every second of that period, I was like, oh, my church. It was just nice to have. And I had these lofty plans. But by the time we did the valuations, we went and sent the surveyor, the cost of the refurb, the cost of everything, it just made no real financial sense. And I was talking to my husband recently about that. And I said, you know, it's funny because there would have been a stage in my property journey. You know, I talk about the 5 different stages of property journey, where you have the acquisition stage where you're just doing flips and cash, you know, you're trying to acquire cash. And then you get into portfolio building, you're trying to build your portfolio. I'm very much in that portfolio building stage. I don't have money to tie into a vanity project. At some point in the future, I'll have that kind of money where I can, you know what, just sink like 500,000 developing my dream church. Yeah, no, that's not happening. So I had to do the reasonable thing. And yeah, and so I'm still suffering from the seller's remorse, but
yeah, I know. But and you're very much into interiors, which I can see just in the setting that's behind you. Are you at home at the moment?
I am.
Yeah, it's just a lovely setting you've got there. So tell us a little bit about your interior design. Did you always start off with that? Have you learned it as you've gone along, or?
Yeah, so design is just, you know, in property, there's so many different aspects, right? So in fact, it's why I came up with the whole 14 ways you can make money in property. It's because there's so many different routes, but you have to just figure out what works for you. I've struggled in that because I've done each of them at varying levels of success. I cannot always feel like, oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, I wish I could, you know, like chasing the golden penny. But interior for me, I love, but it's usually just part of my project. So, and because of service accommodation, you're forced to learn about interior decor. But guess what? There's no need for courses anymore. Just check out House. So House, when I have a project, I either go on Pinterest or House, and I just look for properties that I like, that have the exact. And you know, the great thing about the UK properties that is there's not that much variety, at least in the space that I'm living in. So, you know, a bedroom has just so many ways you can style it out, and the living room as well. So I'll just go to House, I'll check out all those different rooms, and then, you know, everything's online now anyway. So you can style out, and then I'll create the mood board once it looks nice, and that's it. It's not really rocket science, to be honest, but, you know, no offense to interior designers.
Yeah, well, I really found them good. But House, how are you spelling that?
That's HOUZZ.
Oh yes, yeah. I've seen it. Now that you said, but I've never really looked properly. We for our HMOs, and when we bought that the 12-unit property, I just thought, you know what, I want to do something a bit different. I want to do something. I mean, I'm going to do my best, but I wanted to do something a bit different, and I popped into my local a little local cafe, really lovely here, and I was just looking around and thought, this is actually lovely. And I said to John, who owns it, and he said his wife did it, and she actually came and did the interiors for our units, which was amazing. And that was the first time that we'd sort of worked with an interior designer. And you know, we had quite a tight budget for those interiors, and it was incredible to see the difference it made working with her.
Yeah. And no, so I went to because I do love interiors. So I went to France. There's an annual event they have called Maison. And so at this event, you see all sorts of different shows, different stalls. And one thing that was very clear is that if you go for all of these events, you can meet with a lot of the interior design, the companies that you'd source all these products from. And their discounts are not bad at all. So you don't have to charge your clients, to be honest, just off of the discounts between you being a trade professional providing those services. You know, you can earn a nice tidy profit. Some of these profits were, you know, some of the margins were 30%, 40% of the value of the product. So imagine she could easily do the same. And I tell this to people who want to kind of skimp out on getting an interior designer, that actually sometimes getting a designer, you can match the price that you would have paid just buying it from, say, Dwell or Made or whatever. They'll get you almost, maybe it'll be slightly more expensive, but they'll get you really unique stuff. So so I've worked with designers before, but because I really enjoy that space as well.
Yeah, you like it, so you do it. But I suppose it's one of those time or money things again, isn't it, really?
Exactly. It is.
And we've got Gloria saying that she's loving your story. It's very inspiring hearing your business journey. So let's move on now to the family, because as well as doing all these developments and building up this 8-figure portfolio now, and still carry on with your SA business, you're also busy with your husband and children. So tell us a little bit about Property Mom side.
Yes, Property Mom side. So Property Mom all came out from that, isn't because I'm constantly juggling between the kids and the lockdown. That was a tough time because imagine my business world is collapsing, but then normally I'd have kids up to nursery, and now I had to and at some point, you know, mom guilt really plagued me throughout the lockdown because I had all these things I wanted to do, I had to do, but then I had the kids because my husband was working throughout that time at home. So, and he has a normal corporate job, right? So it's not like he can just step out when he has a meeting and say, oh, the kids are crying. It always falls on me. So it doesn't matter whether I was trying to fight off a landlord or fight off a client who I'm refunding for they're not being able to come into the country. I still had to take care of the kids. So it was definitely challenging. My kids had a very strange way of coping during that period. I remember my son started just packing up the house, like literally just started taking boxes and unpacking stuff like he was moving somewhere. So we started small, like we were just traveling. And I was like, oh, that's a pet thing. And then one day I came and he had the entire room. At this point, there's only 4. The entire room, he's packed everything in the cupboards, everything. And they're all in a suitcase, different bags. I was like, where are you going? Like, what is this? This is all you've done. So yeah, so it was times, but we got through it. And so now he's excited to go to school, which he wasn't always, but now he's so excited to go to school because he knows that there's another life that could be happening where he'd be stuck with his mom and dad all day long and his kid sister. So yeah.
He enjoyed it so much he wanted to move out now. I just think that's so cute. I can just see him. He must have been quite proud of himself. Look, Mom.
Really allowing to walk in there, everything's packed. So the room did look tidy, I must say, because like, everything was
like, useful skills.
Yes.
But I call this Property Game Changers because property can really change your life in just what it can do for you as yourself, becoming a leader, what you have to go through to grow your mind, to be able to grow your business. And that it also means that you can contribute in a different way in your community and in the world. And I know that you have big plans in that direction. So I'd love to know more about them.
Okay, so I kind of stumbled into teaching kids to sing when I was young. I can't really hold a note, but I can get them to sing. So I always knew I loved that. And then one day, a choir came, and they were young. They were like maybe 10, 8, and they were singing, and they were like, I started crying. Like I just had a very moving experience, and I knew whilst I love teaching kids to sing, I need and the thing about the choir was that they were made up mainly, it's called the African Children's Choir, made up of children who had very, very deprived upbringing. So maybe their mom had passed away, or their parents had passed away in some kind of genocidal war, something had happened to them that just, and then they were taken basically into sort of like boarding facilities, but they didn't just teach them schoolwork. They then taught them art and singing and a performance. And so I knew that was what I was supposed to do. So this year, of course, this game-changing year, again, I started to put together sort of the building blocks of that. And that's where I really want, that is my legacy project. Like, forget the church. Like, that is the real legacy project. I really want to be able to develop. So I'm originally from Nigeria. And, there are different, a lot of times there are people who are, say, orphans because they've lost their parents. But there are some people that actually, it's not they're orphans. One of my aunties has a project like this where she has, it's not an orphanage. It's a school that's for children who wouldn't normally be able to go to school. So it's something like that I'm looking to do where, in my local town, which is Ibadan, I want to build out that kind of facility where it would be nice boarding, they would learn education, but they will also be talented and teach them. So through music, the idea is that they find themselves through music. And, the amazing thing about it is that it also, because they it kind of works out, it's a charity. And so because they went for all these different events, they got so much, they got a lot of donations and all that, which then went back into their lives to improve on their lives. And so if you see the facilities that they live in now, it's amazing, right? And so that is definitely my project. So it's like when on my podcast, I always ask people, what is your big goal? What is that thing that you're working towards that nobody knows about, but you kind of like, just dig in the whole, making it happen. And that is mine for sure.
Yeah, no, that is, it's just phenomenal to hear about that. And yeah, I can feel it in my heart as well. When you said you could hear them singing and it really touched you. And I love what you're creating and look forward to hearing about it as years go by and it comes into being in reality. So thank you so much, Dolapo, for coming and sharing your journey and, your unique flavor and insights onto it. And I just want to put the banner back up again so that people, anybody who's interested in, getting clarity on what first of all, your first steps might be, and then later on, maybe your big vision as well, go into the bossmumproperty.co.uk and take part in the challenge. And also check out the Property Mum podcast that Dolapo has, where you can find out a little bit more about some of the strategies and techniques that Dolapo has talked about today. Dolapo, as we're coming into a close, is there anything that what would you like to leave people with as maybe inspiration for people who are just getting started?
Okay, so if you're getting started in property, it's understanding that what you want to surround yourself with people that have the same passions as you, right? So you may not, and then I always say you don't always start off with the passion. So the passion you see me exude now, it wasn't like that when I started because I had no idea what I was getting into. I just knew I have an interest in this, and that's how it grows. So you don't always start off with sort of huge, portfolio, huge passion or love for what it is you're doing, but it's just baby steps for being consistent and just consistently applying. You do it whether it's convenient, whether it's inconvenient. Even up till now, I'm waking up at like midnight to 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock to do work, and it's quiet in the house, right? Because I have, I know what I want to achieve. So, for anyone who's starting out, really, it's about being consistent and making sure that you just go at it, regardless of the good times, the bad times. You just consistently go at it. So that's my passing words.
Thanks for that, Dolapo. Thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for watching and for listening. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. But for now, it's bye from Dolapo.
Bye.
And it's bye from me. See you soon.